Hello, good day, class. So we are now on our last um lesson for the contemporary world for the coverage of your examination tonight. So we'll continue with the globalization of the world economic. So the International Monetary Fund or the IMF, so this logo regards the economic globalization as a historical process presenting the result of the human innovation and the technological progress. So this International Monetary Fund, so it gives funding to all organizations that would also promote or to innovate human technological progress. Just like, for example, on this current situation on the COVID-19 pandemic. So the Russia, since Russia is one of the most updated version or the what you call this one, the um when it comes to money or monetary, so they are the one. There's a lot of organization from there who helps or to give fund to it to its organization or like the um its group there in their countries. It is characterized by the increasing integration also of the economies around the world through the movement of the goods, the services, and their capital across the borders. They usually agree that a drastic economic change is occurring throughout the world. These changes are the products of the people, the organizations, institutions, and the technologies. According to the IMF, the value of trade, the goods and services as a percentage of the world GDP or the gross domestic product increased from 42.1% in 1980 to 62.1% in 2007. So there is a lot of increasing from that year. So since our population is increasing, there is also a need to increase the goods and services that we are gonna be using or we're gonna be needing. Increased trade also means that the investment are moving all over the world at a faster speed. So there is a lot of investment in every trade. According to the UN Conference on the Trade and Development, so the amount of foreign direct investments flowing across the world was you up $57 billion in 1982, while in 2015 the number was 1.76 trillion dollars. So, 'di ba? There is a lot of increasing from that times. The second globalization. So we are done on the International Monetary Fund or the IMF. So the second one is the trading systems. So the first under this one is the Silk Road. So it is the oldest known international trade route. So a network of the pathways in the ancient world that spanned from the China to what is now the Middle East and the Europe. It was called as such because of one of the most profitable products traded through this network was the silk, which was highly prized, especially in the area that is now the Middle East, as well as in the West, today's Europe. So we since diba, the silk, so this silk cloth or from the silkworm, it will be result into the silk cloth. So it is a fabric coming from the China. So there is a trade system of moving this silk to another countries, just like in the Middle East and then the Europe. So that is also another example of this trading system, which is the Silk Road. Another is the international trading system. Yes, same pala is the Silk Road. So ito siya is there is a international but not truly global because it had no ocean routes from the past that could reach the American continent. So they use some of it, the airplanes or some services, diba, or these trades from that um, economic globalization. So from in the ancient Silk Road, so it happens on from this China. So diba, coming from the Asia into the Europe, the Kyrgyzstan, um, also lasted in the Italy, and then also yeah, first is in the Middle East, just like this Muslim countries, diba? Because they love wearing this silk cloth or this silk fabric aside from its fashion, but also on the structure. Just like for example, in this picture, a man who holds this um wear this dress that is made of silk. So it comes from China, Tajikistan, or any other Muslim countries such as Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, also coming there, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Turkey, the capital Istanbul, Greece, and Rome, Italy. This is one of the countries from the Europe. Another one is the galleon trade. So according to the historians Dennis O'Flynn and Arturo Giraldes, the age of the globalization began when all the important populated continents began to exchange products continuously, both with each other directly and indirectly via other continents and in values sufficient to generate the crucial impacts on all the trading partners. So it happens just like for example in the China, so it is a populated country, so they began to export those silk. But in this part, on the galleon trade system, or so the Flynn and Giraldes traced this back in the 1571 with the establishment of this galleon trade that connected from the Manila in the Philippines into the Acapulco in the Mexico. So this was the first time that Americas were also directly connected to the Asian trading routes for the Filipinos. It is crucial to note that economic globalization began on the country's shores. It happens in this seas or ocean using these services, this tool or vehicle, the boat. So from the Manila, Philippines, so it will move to the Acapulco, Mexico, using this ocean or sa karagatan. So this galleon trade was part of the age of the mercantilism. So from the 16th century to the 18th century. So the countries primarily in the Europe competed with one another to sell more goods as a means to boost their country's income, called the monetary reserves later on. So they defend their products, so the from the competitors who sold goods more cheaply, so mas barato lang siya or mas mura yung pagbebenta ng mga competitors. So these regimes, mainly the monarchies, imposed a high tariff. So yung mga tao na nasa monarchy, sila lang yung nagbibigay ng mataas na taripa, which also forbade the colonies to trade with other nation. They also restrict yung daanan ng ruta or yung trade mismo, and also subsidize the export. So mercantilism was thus also a system of the global trade with a multiple restriction. So there is also a disadvantage of this mercantilism because parang may limitation siya yung uh, pag-export, pag-global trade sa mga produkto. So we have here an example, so from the Manila, Philippines to the Acapulco in the Mexico. So marami yung siyang dadaan ng mga bansa. So minsan may taripa silang ina-collect ng every countries or mga taxes yun siya, di ba? So mas mahal na naman siya. The third one is the open trade system that emerged in the 1867 when following the lead of the United Kingdom. So the United States and other European nations adopted the gold standard at an international monetary conference in the Paris. So broadly, itong trade system, so from the word open, so open siya sa lahat. So its goal was to create a common system that would allow for more efficient trade and prevent its isolationism. So isolation, so parang di siya makulong sa isa lang na bansa. Of the mercantilists also on that era. So the countries thus established a common basis for the currency, prices, and a fixed exchange rate system, all based on the value of its gold. So despite facilitating that simpler trade, so the gold standard now was still a very restrictive system as it compelled countries back to their currencies with fixed gold services. So again, it happens during the World War One, when the countries depleted their gold reserves to fund their armies. So many were forced to abandon the gold standard since yung mga countries from the Europe had low gold reserves. They adopt floating the currencies that were no longer redeemed its gold. So returning to a pure standard became more difficult as the global economic crisis called the Great Depression started during the 1920s and extended up to the 1230s, further emptying the government coffers. This depression was the worst and longest recession ever experienced by the Western world. So again, Western countries such as in the Europe, so minumura na lang nila yung mga gold reserves nila since they also needed some other products from any other countries. So again, it happens from the word open, so it parang wala siyang limitation sa lahat ng every countries. But on some economists, they argue also that it was largely caused by the gold standard, since it limited the amount of the circulating money and therefore reduced the demand and the consumption. If the governments could only spend money that was equivalent to the gold, its capacity to print money and increase the money supply was also severely curtailed. So again, on that part, so what happened on the open trade system? So since nireduce naman yung demand and the consumption. So if ang gobyerno nila sa Europe could only spend money sa equivalent ng gold na meron lang sila. So the economic historian Barry H. and Green, he argues that the recovery of the US really began when, having abandoned the gold standard, so the US government was able to free up money to spend on reviving the economy. At the height of the World War II, other major industrialized countries also followed suit. So there's a lot of what happened in the open trade system. But basically, its version focused on the gold standard, where it happens on the late 1970s up to now, which is on the early 20th century. But today, the world economy operates based on what are called the fiat currencies. So the currencies that are not backed by the precious metals and also whose value is determined by their cost relative to other currencies. So wala pa siyang pera noon, di ba? Because of the exchange of this gold. So for example, parang barter system siya na thing to thing. Di ba? For example, gusto mo bumili ng laptop, so wala kang pera. So iba-barter mo na lang yung television nyo. So yan siya. Kasi wala pa man siyang currency or money during that time. So it's just the gold that meron lang isang bansa. But on the current situation, so andito na yung Bretton Woods system or yung sa money. So after the two world wars, so the world leaders sought to create the global economic system that would ensure a longer lasting peace. So they believe that one of the ways to achieve this goal is to set up a network of the global financial institutions that promote the economic interdependence and the prosperity. So it was inaugurated in the year 1944 during the UN Monetary and the Financial Conference to prevent the catastrophes or the destruction of the early decades of the century from reoccurring and affecting the international ties. So in the Bretton Woods system, so ito siya, it is a group of people, but it was largely influenced by the ideas of the British economist John Maynard Keynes, who believed that economist crises occur not when a country does not have enough money, but when the money is not being spent and thereby not moving. So yun siya, 'di ba? If there is a lot or a good investment, if hindi siya winawaldas or wala siya ginagasto, 'di ba, ang kwarta. So meaning mas maraming maiipon yung isang bansa ng pera. When an economy slow down, according to Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, so the governments have to reinvigorate markets with infusion of the capital. So this active role of the governments also in managing expanding served as the core for what would be called as the system of the global Keynesianism. So ito siya is, they are a group of people coming from the Europe who said that this money should really be invested or should be kept. So again, another is, as what I have mentioned on the Bretton Woods system, is there is a currency happening on that stage. So this happened, like for example, in the British pound, it has par value, and then also German, and to the French franc. So that is for the US dollar, unlike from the past, which is the gold. Unlike any other countries, they have yen, euro. So Japan is 360 and it is worth for US one US dollars. Also from the Germany, UK, France, Italy, and also from the Canada. That was equivalent from this gold. So yan yung nangyayari during the Bretton Woods system. So it was largely influenced by the idea of John Maynard Keynes. Another one is the neoliberalism. So when we say neoliberalism, so the high point during this time of the global Keynesianism came in the mid-1940s to the early 1970s. So this period, so the governments poured enough money into their economies, allowing people to purchase more goods, and in the processes, increasing the demand for these products. As demand increased, so did the prices of this good. So the word neo is new, a lot of this or governments that was poured enough money sa kanilang ekonomiya. That is yung para naman yung mga tao is marami silang mabibili ng mga goods and services, and then ma-process din siya, and then increase sa kanilang demand sa kanilang produkto. So Western countries, again, from example, the Europe and some Asian economies like the Japan, accepted this rise in the prices because it was accompanied by this general economic growth and the reduce of their unemployment. So with that, lalaki or usbong yung kanilang economic growth kasi marami namang tao ang magtatrabaho. So ma-reduce din yung unemployment or mga tambay na mga tao, di ba? So this theory went that as prices increase, ang economies would earn more. So if ang presyo is tataas, so meaning marami ding kumpanya ang babayaran or tawag nito, yung kumpanya na mahalinan. So dagan po sila mahalinan and would have more money to hire the workers. So meaning there is unemployment. So may mga trabaho din sa mga tao. Also, prices of oil rose sharply of the organization Arab petroleum exporting countries. So, best example nito is sa Saudi, di ba? So, they are the one who has a lot of this oil or this petroleum. So, what happened? So, from the past is ang Saudi is konti na lang yung oil na meron sila ngayon. So, ginamit nila yung pera dati na parang murag halin nila sa ilang oil karon. So there's a lot of buildings na binibuild sa kanila ngayon para naman maka-attract ng mga tourism. So tourism na naman turismo ang focus nila ngayon. So that is why, di ba, maraming mga Hollywood artists na pumupunta sa Saudi para magbabakasyon lang. So with that, there's a lot of money na mag-earn naman sa every companies or hotel na nandun sa Saudi. So again, this neoliberalism also would be a disadvantage to any other countries, di ba? To make matters worse, so the stock markets crashed in the 1973 to 1974 after the United States stopped linking the dollar to the gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system. So ito siya, may disadvantage din ang neoliberalism. Then, the global financial crisis and the challenge of this neoliberalism. So the Russia case was just one example of how the shock therapy of the neoliberalism did not lead to the ideal outcomes predicted by the economists by who believe in perfectly free markets. So the greatest recent repudiation of this thinking was the recent global financial crisis during the year 2000 to 2009. So it came under the significant strain during the global financial crisis that happens on to 2007 to 2008 when the world experienced this greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression. So bumaba naman yung kita or yung goods and services pag-export sa Russia. But on this crisis can be traced back to the 1980s when the United States systematically removed various banking and the investment restrictions. So just like what happened on this current situation, this COVID-19 pandemic, diba, there is a global health crisis. So our economy is also deteriorating or there is some depression during at this time because yun siya. May mga kumpanya nagsasara because sa skeletal schedule or yung sa lockdown na nangyari or sa quarantine. So yung mga tao nila or employees, wala na silang maipasweldo kasi wala namang tao na pumunta like for example sa mga mall or sa mga private schools, di ba? Ngayon, yung mga estudyante from private schools, like for example sa high school, is lumilipat na sa public school kasi modular naman sila. So, parang mas mura lang yung babayaran nila. Unlike sa atin is we have this virtual online classroom. So academically engaged, physically distanced but academically engaged. So yun siya. Also, there's a lot of challenge during this mortgage-backed securities example of this neoliberalism. So the bank, like for example, bank lends John $150,000 in a bank. So John also may buy a house. So some investor may buy the mortgage-backed securities. So it happens that on some large banks, di ba? So sila lang yung makaka-multiply sa pera na magle-lend yung house owner nila. Unlike dito sa atin is parang just like me, I am 25 years old. So parang wala pa akong own bahay. So gusto ko magkaroon ng sarili kong lupa at bahay. Hindi na ako makikitira dito sa pamilya ko or sa parents ko para naman maging independent. So since parang di naman siya sapat yung kinikita ko, so I will just wait if kailan siya tataas yung sweldo ko. So yun siya. Unlike sa other countries, diba, if you go abroad, mas mabuti nga na nagtatrabaho kayo sa abroad unlike and then nag-invest kayo dito sa Pilipinas kasi mas malaki yung value ng pera sa abroad kaysa dito sa Pilipinas. That is why in the near future, I really want to work abroad. Kasi nga, yun siya. I want to really have a new opportunities and earn more money for this resources. And then for the economic globalization for today, so it should be equal. So since one of this global financial crisis will take decades to resolve. So the solutions proposed by certain nationalist and leftist groups closing international economies to world trade will no longer, the world has become too integrated. So as you can see in this picture, so there should be an equal or balance between our world or our earth, planet earth, and our money. Because as what we are experiencing today on this COVID-19 pandemic, this result of the climate change, so diba, because we are using a lot of our resources to earn more monies, just like what happened sa Brazil, diba, sa Amazon Brazil is yung government nila is pinuto nila lahat ng mga puno sa Amazon forest para naman tatayo na sila ng mga factories or any other a lot of building para sa kanilang mga business doon. So yun siya. So it should be equal between our world and our economy. Para naman in the next future, we could have another peace and harmony in living on this world. So another saying from the Washington, so whatever opinion about the Washington Consensus is, it is undeniable that some form of international trade remains essential for the countries to develop in this contemporary world. So exports, not just the local selling of goods and services, make a national economies grow at present. In the past, those that benefited the most from free trade were the advanced nations that were producing and selling the industrial and agricultural goods. Also, the United States and Japan and other member countries of the Europe were responsible for this 65% of the global exports, while us developing countries just like the Philippines only accounted for a total of 29%. So when more countries opened up with their economies to take advantage of the increased free trade, so the shares of the percentage also began to change. So on the year 2011, so developing countries just like Philippines, India, China, Argentina, and Brazil accounted for 51% of our global exports, while the share of advanced nations, including the United States, had gone down to 45%. Just like, for example, here in the picture, the globalization and economics could be a benefit to the trade and transaction, a capital investment movements, migration, or and a movement of people to another countries, also a dissemination of knowledge or the innovative thinking. Another form that would describe the globalization. Okay, that's a wrap for our last discussion for the coverage of your first examination. So, by the way, we will have our first exam days tonight at 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. And the deadline for your exam is until 12 midnight. So, that's all for today. Thank you, guys.